All right, we'll just wait for everyone to get into the room and then see the numbers going up. Get started here in a moment. All right, then good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to What Does It Take to be a WSET Educator? My name is Chris Martin, and I'm joined by my colleague, Joseph Hallam. And we're going to tell you a little bit about the steps that are required to become an educator for WSET at one of our approved program providers around the world. So I'm sure you all know a little bit about WSET already, but we are the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. And we have about 800 course providers, what we call approved program providers or APPs, around the world in around 70 different countries. And we offer a number of different courses in approximately 15 different languages. And so today we're going to talk about how you could potentially teach one of those different levels or courses and what the steps are to get that. So my name, as I said, is Chris, and I am the head of educator training here at WSET in the London head office. My background is in teaching and teacher training. And I've been with the WSET for nearly 7 years now. I joined in the business development team, where I was looking after our schools in Southeast and Northeast Asia. So welcome to people from that part of the world. And about 4.5 years ago, I took over the educator training program, rejigged some of the administrative side of that, rejigged the whole program, adapted to COVID. And so it's quite exciting today to take you through what we've done with all of those particular things. And I'm joined by my lovely colleague, Mr. Hallam, from the EMEA team. Joseph, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chris. So I'm Joseph, as Chris has said. I work in the business development team for Europe, Middle East and Africa. I'm one of the senior managers in that team. So my day-to-day job really is looking after our course providers, helping them find and grow business throughout that whole region. As we say, everything from Iceland to India in our particular region. I will be talking on a global context tonight, though. So these things that we talk about this evening with Chris, they apply if you're based in the Americas or if you're based in the APAC region as well. To give you a little bit about my background, I've been with WSET for over 8 years. Before that, I had a job in retail in the wine industry, but I'd also done some teaching as a student. And as I've spent my time with WSET, I've got more and more involved with the educator side of things. That means teaching courses, but it also means supporting Chris and his team in delivering our educator training program, which we'll talk about at length this evening.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Joseph. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you do have any questions throughout the course, the webinar, if you could put that into the Q&A chat, which you should be able to see there, then Joseph and I will be monitoring it a little bit throughout, and then if we don't answer it during our talk, we will definitely have time at the end of our talk, and we will try to get through as many of those questions within the next hour, so that you should be able to have an answer to those questions. So if you have any questions, please plop them in there and we will get to that. The other point is that this will be available on YouTube. So if you have to drop out for whatever reason, this will be going up to YouTube later on this week, and I'm sure an email will be going out to that effect. Marvelous. So let us get started. What are we going to be talking about today? So what Joseph and I are going to be walking you through over the next sort of 35-40 minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A, is what do we mean by a WSET educator, and how does that differ from other types of educator programs, in particular in the drinks industry. We'll be talking about what is a WSET, or what is the WSET Educator Training Program. So Educator Training Program, we will be referring through it throughout as the ETP. If you're familiar with WSET, we like our alphabet soup, and the ETP are 3 other letters that we've added to that delightful soup. Joseph will walk us through who can access the program and sort of eligibility requirements and sort of the steps that are necessary to get you onto the course. Then I'll talk a little bit more about the course program, what it looks like, the different types of assessment that you have pre-course and during and post-course. Then I shall hand it back to my esteemed colleague Joseph, who will take us through the different study options. Then we'll just talk a little bit about together some of the things that we're working on in the Educator Training Program as a larger part of WSET, and how that might affect you and your particular journey to become a WSET educator. So let's get started. This is, but when you come on to the Educator Training Program, this is one of the first questions that I like to pose to our candidates who come on, which is, what is the difference between a non-WSET wine, spirit, sake educator or presenter and a WSET educator? And there are lots of overlaps, and I imagine we have 260 odd people currently on the call at the moment. I imagine lots of you have background in either doing master classes or doing teaching or training programs at your place of work, or indeed perhaps you come from a more of an education background, teaching at secondary, primary, or higher education areas. And obviously there's always an overlap, and certain skills that you learn in one of those areas and the other definitely feed into the WSET educator remit. But I think what's one of the most important things that differentiates the purpose of a WSET educator versus other forms is the ultimate aim. And the ultimate aim of a WSET educator, and I stress this, I always say, if there's one thing you're going to forget in the ETP, don't forget this. It is that at the end of the course, of a WSET course, it is about maximizing the success of your students on their final examination. And all WSET courses have an examination at the end, and it is your role as the educator to ensure that your students are maximizing their chances to get top marks, whether that is distinction or merit, or even indeed the Vintners Cup, which is the top one for diploma. So there's lots of different skills that are going into that. But what we are very much focused on in the ETP is, how do you achieve that to maximize success for your students based on level 1, level 2, level 3, and indeed, if you're teaching level 4 for wines. So that is something that we focus on, and part of that is an understanding of what WSET, how it ring fences the information at each of the different levels. But that being said, we get lots of people from lots of different backgrounds, so sort of from the trade, as well as from the educator side, and thinking about how you can transfer those skills through the lens rather of WSET. So with that in mind, what is the WSET Educator Training Program? Well, this essentially is the program that accredits our future educators to become what we call WSET certified educators. So you can become a WSET certified educator, brackets wines, brackets spirits, brackets sake, or bracket any combination of those 3. If you complete the WSET Educator Training Program successfully, you will receive this certification, and indeed this label, this logo rather, that you can affix to emails, business documents, and so forth. We get asked this a lot. Sadly, we do not have a pin yet. I shall pester our marketing team. I'm sure they'll be delighted to hear. So drop comments and say what color you would like that pin to be, and I'm sure I'll pass that on to our marketing team. But you do get a certificate and this accreditation. The way that this works is we have different streams. So we have wines, we have spirits, we have sake. I hope that this is probably not new to those of you, 277 now, who are on the call. You are familiar with our different streams that we have. Joseph will talk a little bit more about the requirements of all of this, but in essence, what we require of our educators is to hold the level above which they're going to be teaching. Now, for level 3 wines, that would mean that you would need to hold the diploma. If you want to teach just level 1 and level 2 wines, you would need to hold the level 3 wines. For spirits, it's slightly different, as is for sake. You must hold the level 3 spirits or the level 3 sake. Then there is a little extra thing to prove that you have knowledge beyond those particular levels. And what is very important, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later on, is that as an educator, you fully understand how these courses are put together, and you understand the limits of what is the information that's covered at level 1, level 2, level 3, and so forth. And that's very important as you're teaching your students to ensure that you don't go beyond the syllabus, i.e. overcomplicate something for your students, but equally at other levels that you don't go under the syllabus and therefore set your students up for failure by not giving them the correct information. So the program is very much focused on WSET, it's the WSET Educator Training Program, but it is also very much about thinking about it through the lens of the particular category and the particular level of what you're teaching. So for those of you who do hold other teaching qualifications and other teaching qualifications beyond even drinks, you will be familiar with lots of the ideas and concepts we talk about in the Educator Training Program. However, what we are doing in this very short time, which is just about 4 days, 4 solid days, though we do have other formats, which Joseph will talk about later, is that by the end of it, that you have a fairly good understanding of how to teach WSET at that level for that stream. And that's very much what we are looking at. So it is a very specific teaching qualification, and it is very targeted and very focused to WSET. That being said, we hope that lots of the skills that you learn, and indeed many of the people who do the ETP, take the skills that they have learnt in that program and apply it to other different masterclasses or tastings that they do throughout their career or job as it is. So I'm going to hand it over now to Joseph a little bit to talk a bit about the many different reasons why people come on to the ETP. So Mr. Hallam.
Thanks, Chris. So yeah, I'm going to talk about some of those motivations that you might have there as an individual. And some of these might be business motivations, but some of these are just sort of intrinsic personal motivations that we might have coming onto the course. The first one there in the purple box is maybe the most obvious, delivering WSET qualifications as a WSET course provider, one of those APPs that Chris has talked about. What we need is at least one person at each of those organizations, at each of those course providers, who's been onto our educator training program and passed that program, because they're then going to have the role of lead educator at that course provider. And others might be teaching with you as well, who haven't necessarily gone onto the ETP, and it's then your responsibility to make sure that they uphold the standards that you've met coming onto the ETP, that classroom basically operates in a way that meets our learning outcomes for each course at WSET. So monitoring, training those educators, supporting them outside of the classroom as well. So obviously, so specifically about delivering WSET qualifications. The other thing, and we see this a lot especially in the drinks industry, developing teaching that can be applied to masterclasses and other tastings. We are definitely developing skill sets that encourage you to speak clearly, to deliver content in an understandable way, to describe products, to describe a physical sensation of tasting this product in understandable language. That's going to be applicable in lots of situations in the drinks industry, not just in a WSET setting. Thinking how you're planning for your time. If you've got an hour to run a masterclass, you need to think, how am I going to apportion that time appropriately? DTP will develop those sorts of skills. Learning how to develop your own content is strongly linked to that as well. So if you're developing your own course, or you are putting WSET content within the context of a larger training program or a larger education program, thinking about the content that goes alongside that, you will understand a better approach for developing it, having come onto the ETP. Because what we're thinking about is not just the content that you're delivering, you're thinking about how to deliver it. How do I develop resources that are going to support my delivery of it? Really crucially, thinking about, who are my students? Where do they come from? What is their job role? What is their experience of being in a training environment? How familiar are they already with this product? And if we ask those questions and determine that at the start of any given course or session, then we can think, right, what does this next session need to focus on? What does this next module need to focus on? And the WSET ETP helps to put that into context and think about how you might develop that yourself. But also learning to explain complex topics clearly and concisely. And this does not have to be in a training situation at all. This might be communicating clearly with your clients. It might be communicating clearly with team members and other people that you work with as well. WSET's Educator training program, it's really going to encourage you to use language in a clear way, construct sentences that are easily understood, questions that are clearly constructed. We'll talk about tactics like signposting and how that helps you move a conversation along and develop that conversation in a progressive way. So all of these sort of different tactics and personal skills can be useful and applicable to lots of different settings. What I'll also talk about is who can come onto this course. You've probably already noticed, if you've arrived at this webinar and done a little bit of research about the Educator training program, is the Educator training program is not a sort of openly accessed course. There's not a button that you will find on the internet to book your course. Now it's going to need some interaction and sort of planned interaction with WSET about how you're going to use the ETP. That's a really important question. So I'll talk a little bit about that. As Chris alluded to, you do need to be sitting on a base level of qualification with WSET already. You need to have gone through our courses as a student yourself. And that's because your students have a very reasonable expectation that the person that's teaching them for the next day or the next 5 days on one of our longer courses, or the next 18 months if you end up teaching on a diploma program, is really, they've been through that as well. They understand the exam that you're about to tackle. They understand the syllabus that you're about to tackle as well. And in fact, they are qualified to a higher level than that, which goes back to what Chris was saying about having generally that level above the qualification that you are going to teach. So really, that means in a wine context, having level 3 if you want to teach levels 1 and 2, having level 4 if you're wanting to teach levels 1, 2, and 3. This evening, we're really going to sort of focus the conversation about teaching levels 1 to 3 in a wine context. We won't talk so much about preparing to teach level 4. That's sort of a separate conversation in itself. But with sake and with spirits, likewise, holding that top level of qualification. So that is level 3 in spirits or sake. But also as you come on the Educator training program, we are going to be testing and stretching your product knowledge, perhaps to a level above level 3, in fact, and sort of pushing that again to make sure that people going into our classroom really have that product authority to command that classroom with confidence. In terms of what your situation is, though, as an educator, this is a really important thing to emphasize. You do need to be someone that is either already working with an APP or has an agreement plan to work with that APP. So that course provider essentially is sort of sponsoring you onto the course and placing you onto the course. Or you need to be in a situation where you are applying to open a new course provider. That isn't simply a case of emailing us and saying, I plan to open a new course provider. Can I come on the ETP? That will be entering into a sort of a full application process with WSET. So I work in the business development team. We spend a lot of our time working with APP applicants, doing lots of things like business planning, marketing planning, administration planning, because opening one of those centers does not just mean being a good educator, it also means you're able to run a small business successfully as well. So putting all of that planning into place, actually before we get to a point where we book you onto an ETP, quite often the educator training program is sort of the last large piece of the puzzle before a new APP would be approved. Okay, so that talks a little bit about what access looks like at the moment and why you can't go to the WSET website and just book now for the next available ETP.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Joseph. I'm just marking some people's responses here who are asking questions about diploma teaching, and Joseph alluded to, excuse me, Joseph alluded to that. I will talk a little bit further about that at the end of the course. However, I will stress at this point, though we require a level of knowledge beyond the level which you're going to teach, this doesn't mean that you need to be a master of wine or a master sommelier in order to teach diploma. However, there is a separate program for diploma educators, the Diploma Educator program, which I'll talk about at the end of the course. Just briefly, the other point, as this is a good point to mention, a few of you have been asking, for those of you who did the diploma in diploma level 4 in wines and spirits. So that was anyone who did the course prior to August 1st, 2019. That would have been the unit 4, which is the spirits module. You are no longer eligible to teach the spirits courses, as the spirits courses have changed dramatically since then. We have since launched a new version of the level 1, the level 2, and indeed the level 3. And so the level 3 spirits is quite beyond what was originally taught in the unit 4 of the level 4 diploma in wine and spirits. So for those of you who want to teach spirits, you will need to do the spirits qualifications. So hopefully that's done that. I will, those were a few questions there that I know that a few of you had asked, so we will get to a few more of those at the end of the session. So moving on, talking a little bit about what do you learn on the ETP. Joseph sort of highlighted some of the key skills that are transferable from the ETP to other parts of the business, of your business perhaps. And I think what's really important is to understand how we have constructed the 4 levels. I say 4 levels, regardless of wine, spirits, or sake, these are all based on the same idea, which for those of you who are familiar is based on what's called Bloom's taxonomy of learning. And this is something that we have integrated over the past. It's always underpinned WSET courses, but it's very much become explicit over the past, I would say, sort of 10, 15 years, and is something that we keep very much as an underpinning in product development as we move through and develop our courses. So level 1 is very much about knowing facts. So it is knowing the grapes of certain regions, it's knowing the characteristics of certain wines. Level 2 is understanding perhaps why that wine tastes the way it is, understanding to explain how the wine might be different from one region to the next region. Level 3 is about explaining and applying that knowledge. So understanding why something is different from one region to the next, or in what way winemakers, for example, can manipulate particular things to change the outcome of the liquid in the glass. And that could also be applied to sake or to spirits. And then level 4, which at the moment only exists for wines, and that's wines only, is about analyzing. So it's sticking it within a larger global context. So if we were to take a wine example and say at level 1, know about Beaujolais, you would simply need to know that it is a red wine from France. It has the particular characteristics of X, Y, and Z. At level 2, you would need to understand how Beaujolais Village, and Fleury, for example, how they taste differently, and understand that hierarchy and exactly how winemakers can manipulate them to make different styles. Whereas at level 3, you would need to still know information, you would need to still understand information, but you would need to be able to explain, rather, in what way winemakers can manipulate the growing conditions in the vineyards or in the winery to affect the ultimate liquids in the glass. And at level 4, it is about analyzing it. So you would need to understand, how does Beaujolais market influence, or what are the strengths and weaknesses of it in the global wine scene, given all the different types of styles of wines that exist. There was a question about the more eagle-eyed and mathematical of you may have noticed that we have level 1 in sake and we have level 3 in sake, but we do not have level 2 in sake. That is, I believe, currently under development, and hopefully in the next few years will be released. The exact date of that, I'm not sure, but there is a plan to eventually fill that lacuna there. So as we're going through, thinking about from the ETP, you've hopefully been able to sign up for the ETP. What happens? What do you need to do? There's a number of pre-course assignments that you are given. There's a confirmation email which tells you full instructions and gives you a session and a sample depending on the course type. There is an online preparation course. This is for wine and spirits at the moment. Sake has a preparation workbook, about 50-page workbook that you have to complete. Both of them should take about 10 hours to complete, with a number of assignments that you need to do. You are given, as I say, micro sessions and session plans. So this is how we assess you, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. And you are given copies of ebooks based on the stream that you have enrolled on. So you get, if you're in wines, regardless of what level, you would get 1, 2, 3 in wines, same with spirits, same with sake. So the way that the course is structured, for those of you who are doing or have done the diploma, this may look somewhat familiar. We have foundation and skills modules. Foundation modules include product and WSET knowledge, and educator skills and professionalism. Product and WSET knowledge essentially means, do you understand about how spirits are distilled? Do you understand about rice polishing? Do you understand what the grape of Chablis is? More or less, we assume, because one of the requirements of coming onto the educator training program is having the level above the course that you're going to teach, and holding that qualification, that you know this information already. The WSET knowledge is understanding the specification, which are all freely available on the WSET Global website, wsetglobal.com. And you can download and read all the specifications to understand what is covered at level 1, level 2, level 3, and so on, and what exactly is and is not examinable. We expect students, when they enter the course, more or less to have all of that knowledge. So already 25% there. Educator skills and professionalism. This is skills that we will develop throughout. I'll talk a little bit about what those skills are. Chief amongst them is what we call active learning, which is student-centered learning. And that's very much the focus and the way that this program has been put together. And professionalism is ultimately the idea that you are a decent human being, which hopefully all 281 of you currently on the call are. And the idea here is, though this is an educator course and you are going to go on and teach WSET, hopefully, you are also going to be representing WSET, and you may very well be someone's first interaction with WSET. And so what this program also asks is, do you have the skills and professionalism to represent us in a positive light? So again, more or less, we assume that you already have that sort of level of professionalism. So you're well on your way to passing the course, and you haven't even signed up. Congratulations. Skills module, you will, and the final day of whichever course you take, there will be a theory micro session, which is usually 15 minutes long. And in that 15 minutes long session, we will be looking for a number of different things, in particular, an idea, an example of active learning. We give you the topic, we give you the PowerPoint, we give you the session plan, and throughout the course, we work with you to develop your skills. Then we will ask you to conduct a WSET tasting. That's usually 10 minutes, depending on the course that you're taking. We assign you the sample. If it's an in-person course, we will give you the sample, we provide that to you. And again, this isn't about, are we testing your ability to taste? That's already been done in your level 3 course, whether that is spirit, sake, or wine, or diploma in wines. What we're looking at is, can you use the sample to underpin the theory behind it? These are the 4 modules. They each are assessed slightly differently. Module 1 is throughout the course. Module 2 is through a set of pre-course assignments. And the skills module, module 3 theory and module 4 tasting, are done through a 15 and 10-minute tasting micro session, respectively. This is the format of most of the courses. There's some slight differences as you go through. I mentioned this slightly earlier, and Joseph slightly alluded to some of this before, but I think it is important we get asked, what does it look like? What does it mean to succeed on a WSET course? And what we are looking at essentially boils down to 3 key fundamentals. It's slightly more complicated, as I'm sure you can imagine. However, this is very much what we're looking at. So we're looking at active learning. This is student-centric learning, for those of you who are familiar with that term. The idea is that it's not actually what we're doing at the moment, which is a webinar. You might be sitting there cooking your dinner or eating your breakfast and listening to us, or not listening to us, depending. And that is non-active learning. But webinars are that indeed. But what we would want is active learning, so that students are engaged in their learning and able to interact and really capture that knowledge. And of course, all teachers and all educators do that slightly differently. And at WSET, we welcome that span of difference, but what we are looking for is a sense of active learning. We're looking to be level appropriate. That is that at level 1, you don't start mentioning malolactic conversion because you don't want some students in the back of the room to burst into tears. And at level 3, for example, that they have an assumption that they already know what level 1 and level 2 is covered about. So here it is understanding very much the form and the syllabus that underpin WSET courses. And finally, we're looking at is, how are you adding value? I always say, and it's written throughout the ETP program, you are not an audiobook. You could easily take the level 1, level 2, level 3 materials, turn it into an audiobook and just listen to it. or just recite it in the class. And that's not what we want students or educators to do. So how do you add value? And there's a number of ways of adding value. It's through being active, through asking questions, through providing other materials, creating engaging activities, interacting with students and meeting their type of learning styles, whether that might be more active, more kinesthetic, more visual, or what have you. So these are the three fundamentals that we look at. And one of the other key factors of WSET is also what we call the DNA of tasting. And I'm going to introduce this idea, but this is an idea that's explored at great depth throughout all the ETPs, regardless of the category. We are asking our educators to do a number of things. The first thing is to develop students' tasting skills. Here we have a wine that is defined in this particular way. And so you are calibrating students to be able to develop this particular tasting. But that's only half of what you want to do. What we also want students to do is start to link that particular tasting to a particular theoretical point. So the color might be related to variety, winemaking, skin contact, post-fermentation, maceration. The ripe fruit flavors might be related to climate, the ripening periods, the weather, the harvest time, blending, any particular things, so forth and so on. And drawing this link together to use the sample to underscore the theory is what makes a WSET tasting, wines, spirits, or sake, different from other types of tasting. And this building on this type of understanding is something that is particularly important for us. And so I do this as a sort of taster of part of what we do at WSET. I'm sure you're sick of hearing my voice, so change of voices here. And Joseph will just start talking about the different types of courses that exist.
Thanks, Chris. So again, if you talk to any colleagues or friends who've been through the course, you might be familiar with some of this terminology, or if you've done some basic research already about the ETP, it's worth me just highlighting the different types that are out there. We talk about the ETP, but as things stand, as you can see, there are sort of 4 different courses. There is the full course, which I guess is the one that people talk about the most when it comes to the ETP. This is essentially, you have done your baseline WSET qualifications. That might be a level 3 or a level 4 qualification, but you haven't done any other educator training with WSET yet. You might have done some teacher training elsewhere or some educator training elsewhere, but you haven't done that with WSET. In that case, you're going to enter into a full course with WSET, into that online preparation course that Chris talked about, and onto what is either 4 days done intensively, full days in person, or 7 half days if you're doing it online. And I'll talk about those 2 things in more detail in a second. Okay, so that's your full course. Lots of practice sessions, lots of input from WSET as well, group discussions, mini exercises, talking about all these theoretical concepts, and then how to apply them. Crucially, we always need to apply them. We need to do the teaching in order to become better teachers. So that's what a full course looks like, and obviously finishes in a final assessment. We also have something called our top-up course. This is specific to wine and spirits at the moment. So I will sort of demonstrate through our wine courses what this means. You have completed your level 3 in wines, and then you have an opportunity to become a WSET certified educator, and you become that for levels 1 and 2 wines, because they're the levels below you that you can teach. Then later, or at the same time, you undertake your diploma studies and you pass your level 4 in wines 2 years down the line. in that situation, you come back to WSET, and in order to become a certified educator for level 3, you do our top-up course. And that's a shorter course. You don't have to go into the same amount of detail or backtracking on what you did at level 1 and level 2, but we make sure you can top up those skills in a level 3 context. Okay, so that's our top-up course. Our conversion course is you're in a situation where you have already done your educator training program in a specific subject, and then you have also done your qualifications in another subject stream. So this might be a situation where you have already done all our spirits qualifications, and then later you do your wine qualifications and you want to become a certified educator for wine, already being a certified educator for spirits. You would come and do our conversion course. Again, a shorter course, following a lot of the same concepts and educational theories that we practice in all of our courses and all of our classrooms, but obviously applying it to some of the product specifics that we have in that new category. So that's what the conversion course looks like. And the refresher, that's a new course that we're about to launch. That is for educators who have maybe done their educator training program several years ago. Their qualification status hasn't changed. They haven't done a new higher level of qualification necessarily, but they just want that opportunity to come back to WSET, refresh some of the concepts that they explored all those years ago, come and see some of our new methodology and support around that topic. And for us, that's just a one-day course that we are about to introduce out there. So they're the different types of course. Then we have different methods of study. Important to say, whichever method of study you're taking, your first step will always be the online preparation course. So the first thing you do getting ready for an ETP is going to be completing some online modules that you do in your own time with some support from WSET. That's before the course. Then when we actually launch into the course itself, we have two streams. We have our in-person courses run in a classroom with your other candidates and your WSET faculty all in the same room on site and going through that course at the same time. As I said, if that's a full course, that's something that we typically do in 4 days, 4 consecutive days. Okay. As we all know all too well, a couple of years ago, we went into a very strange situation where none of us could come and do anything in person. And so Chris and his team hurried to it and quickly developed a virtual course option for the educator training program. Okay, and with a little bit of a learning curve for all of us going through that at that time, we've developed a really successful program which we host on Zoom. And this is the same content that you'll see in an in-person course. You'll do all the same modules. You'll have all the same opportunities to interact and to practice your micro sessions and develop your skills going through that course. Your qualification at the end will look identical to someone who's coming to an in-person course. But one key change that we have made is we've stretched that course out a little bit. So instead of 4 intensive days, we have 7 half days spread over a couple of weeks. So there'll be a weekend in the middle typically as well. And that is just because, as I'm sure you're finding out this evening, it's quite hard work to sit down and listen to someone on Zoom going on for ages. So we've split that up, and that's more manageable in that format for our virtual course students. Okay, so they're the 2 options, but important to emphasize, you're going to come out with the same qualification. And people who've been through our virtual courses, the vast majority of them, they're going to be teaching in the classroom most of the time, and we're setting them up for success to be able to teach in the classroom. And we'll talk about the resources and the challenges that you need to get ready to do so. But this obviously has nice flexibility, especially if you've got a long way to travel, or you have work or family situation that doesn't allow easy travel. This is a nice way to stay at home or in your office and complete the course that way.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Joseph. And the other thing to mention is, so a few of you have been asking about price. Price is slightly dependent on a number of different factors, and we'll give you a list of resources on who to contact to get a quote on that. What's important is that the in-person and virtual are for the same type, the same price, as it is the same amount of contact hours. The other point, just to mention for those of you, I don't know, many of you might be very late there, or if you're watching this on YouTube in our APAC, Asia Pacific region, we do offer 10-day virtual courses, but it's not 10 days full days, they are half days. And you're not required to come to all of the days. That's simply from a staffing point of view. However, again, in terms of contact time, it is no different from any of the other courses. There's a myriad of different ones we have adapted from the post-COVID world. Marvelous. So I just want to move on and we'll just wrap up with a few of this, and then there have been a few questions which Joseph and I will respond to in the last sort of 10-15 minutes, just highlighting some of the additional things that we are doing at WSET in terms of what happens after the ETP. We are running new educator courses. These are new particular programs in different courses, in different streams, in different types, in different sort of formats, both virtual and in person. And this is both for those of you who have completed the ETP, such as the refresher course, those of you who are going to go on potentially to teach diploma, which is the diploma educator course, and equally those of you who have not attended the educator training program but would like to teach. So there have been quite a few questions about this. It's this sort of, you know, it's that great circle of, in order to teach, you have to have the qualification, but in order to get the qualification, you have to be sponsored by a school. And it sort of does feel like this catch-22. There is a possibility of what exists at many of our approved program providers, and this is about becoming what's called a course educator. And to be a course educator, you have to hold, at least for wines, the level 3, at least for spirits level 3, and at least for sake level 3. But you don't necessarily have to have completed the educator training program. So you can approach your APP, your local APP, and say, look, can I come on as a course educator? And then the school will take you on. The idea would be that they would then provide some of the guidance that the educator program would do. And once you are a course educator, then you can nominate yourself or be nominated by your APP to go on the educator training program. So that is another option there. But we will equally be rolling out over the next 18 months course educator programs. So those people who want to just be course educators and not necessarily the full educators, that option does exist. And further information about that, we'll talk about who to contact. We also have development of online resources. So we will be developing, we have already launched one for spirits educators, and we will be launching one for wine educators and sake educators in due course, which has a number of resources, videos, content available to help become a better educator and stay on top of things. And then last but not least, we have our business development teams. Joseph, we'll talk about that.
I'll just talk a little bit about that. Obviously, after you leave the ETP, the questions do not stop from your point of view. The planning does not stop. In fact, it's normally just the beginning. The business development team is there to give you that continued support. That might be about planning your specific wine lists, which need some thought and some application and some research, especially in lots of the markets we work with across the world. So planning your program schedule in a way that's going to suit you, your business, most importantly, your students as well. So thinking about those things, directing you to all the resources that we have on hand centrally at WSET already. We've got lots of resources developed by our product development team that will support you in the delivery of our courses successfully. We've also got a lot of product specialists within our business development team, and we have people in that business development team who teach these courses as well. So if you need some additional support thinking about a particular session, getting ready to teach that, if you want a second pair of eyes because you find a particular session challenging to deliver and you want to talk it through with someone, normally our business development team will be in a position to either do that directly ourselves or find someone at WSET who is the appropriate person to support you through that.
Marvelous. Thank you very much, Joseph. Just in terms of who to contact, Joseph, do you want to maybe just briefly?
Yeah, let me cover this off. And there are lots of conversations about how do I get started? How do I access this course? If this webinar today doesn't answer those questions, really the best place to come to, if you haven't got a local course provider where you already have that relationship where you can ask them the questions, is to come to your business development team. And we've got 3 regional business development teams that operate around the world. We've got WSET Americas. You can see their email address on the slide there. You've got Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I'll just highlight that also includes India and Southern Asia. So do contact the EMEA team if you're in that part of the world, and we'll give you guidance. If you come to the team and you're actually looked after by another team, we do all talk to each other at WSET. We will make sure that you find the right person eventually. And then we have our Asia Pacific team as well, and their email address is included. So really, if you've got sort of remaining questions about, especially access to this course, it's good to come to these 3 teams to answer some of those questions. And I think in the Q&A, we'll have a few things related to that as well.
Excellent. Just while we're just sort of on, there's quite a lot of questions here. A few people have asked similar questions. So if I've marked your question as answered, do just look at the answered one because there will likely be the answer there. In terms of becoming an APP, Joseph, could you just maybe briefly talk about that process? So this is, again, lots of you have been talking about this catch-22, and we're very aware of this catch-22. Unfortunately, that it is the nature of just the resourcing from our side at WSET that we do require that APP side. However, there's the option of becoming your own APP. So maybe, Joseph, the 20-second, how to do that. Yeah, absolutely. Again, it starts with those 3 email addresses that are still up on the screen. Is coming to us and talking about that. We will send you an overview, a sort of online brochure of what that process involves and what the different responsibilities involved with starting a course provider. The way I always categorize it are into sort of 3 key things that you need to be thinking about before you open a course provider or before you even approach us to go down that route. One is the education side of things. We're talking about that at length this evening. So having that education planning and obviously completing the ETP is a huge step in that. But also then thinking about business and marketing planning in detail. Who is your market? Who are you going to sell this course to? Who's going to enroll? What does that demand look like in your particular market? What are the needs at that given point? So planning that out. And then we are an Ofqual regulated, UK government regulated awarding organisation. There is a lot of administration planning that needs to go on in the background as well, especially around student record keeping, around the running of exams in the most sort of protected and trusted way possible. As an APP, you're also going to be in charge not just of teaching, but of running and hosting exams, and that all needs to be planned out in detail as well. Excellent. And just one point on that, a few people have been asking, and I'll just answer this very quickly. In terms of having to have a brick and mortar location, you don't need to have a brick and mortar location. There are a number of different places you could rent. You could use hotels, you could use embassies. So again, use your BD resource, the 3 emails there, 3 marvelous teams that will get in touch with you. I just want to briefly talk about, someone had said if they have a learning disability such as dyslexia or whatnot. We obviously take this very seriously, and we are very inclusive. So any sort of disability or learning disability that you might have, as long as you make that known to us, we will work with you to make sure that you are not disadvantaged. There is a fantastic educator, I'm sure he won't mind me saying his name, by the name of Richard Lane, who is visually impaired. And he not only completed the diploma in wines, but he has also passed the educator training program and teaches at a number of schools. So we have ways to work with that. So I want to make sure that everyone knows that this is, though it feels perhaps exclusive, it is exclusive to a certain extent in terms of eligibility. We are very aware of that. We are working on expanding the offering. However, once you are eligible, we are very inclusive on those particular parts.
Chris, can I just talk a little bit about the question around APPs, that relationship with APPs and educators or potential educators approaching that APP for job opportunities or to be sponsored onto the ETP? It's a really hard question for us to answer, mainly because we work with 800 different APPs and all of their situations are specific. They're all independently run. What they have at any given point in terms of demands for courses and an education team that can already meet that demand for courses, or the need to employ extra educators, that looks different in every situation. You don't need to be a permanently employed member of staff with that APP. You could be working there on a consultancy basis as an educator, but you do need to establish that contact. And as Chris has sort of said, the reason that access is sort of somewhat restricted around the ETP is because basically it comes down to our resourcing and really needing to focus the ETP access into the hands of people who are going to go out and teach WSET courses and have that clear, proven opportunity to do so. And so that means working with an established APP that already has access to the market, or it means showing that opportunity through a new APP application. We're not in a position yet where we can invite everyone onto this course just for the need of sort of personal development. It has a sort of a business end to it, and making sure that we sort of maximize our access to the course where it's needed most.
And there's been a few people asking about sort of the number of people we put through and the pass rates that we have. We do have, and we're working on a report at the moment about those exact figures. Obviously, with COVID, things were slightly skewed. We are on track, I believe, to just have under 300 educators go through the program in this academic year. And I would say that the pass rate in general it's relatively high. It's not 100%, but it would be somewhere between the range of sort of 70 to 80%. If you are unsuccessful on the ETP, we don't kick you off and say never come back. That's not what we do. We work with you to sort of say, okay, what is it that you need? And it's very much a bespoke sense of development of programs. It could be a re-observation, it could be submitting assignments, it could be re-observing a number of classes, it could be co-teaching. We have a number of different possible outcomes that are indeed possible for that. Excellent. So I'm just, Joseph, I don't know if there were any other questions that you saw.
Yeah, there's a question that's come up a couple of times about which markets, which countries you'd be able to teach in with the certified educator designation. We run and we assess the course in English, so just one thing to establish as well, and I'm not sure if we've said it explicitly tonight, but that's all done in English. Now, we do not then restrict which languages you work in, as long as it is one of those languages in which our qualifications exist. So we work in 15 different languages for various courses that WSET offers. Your certified educator status is not restricted to a particular language. It's not restricted to a particular market or country. So that applies everywhere you go. That is different to if you're looking at and researching in this area, your APP status. APP status, think of the APP as that business, as that sort of brand name. In that case, the APP's approval is related to a particular market and particular territory. Your personal status as certified educator is not.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Joseph. Yeah, and we've been asked questions about where the courses are, how often we run. We normally run, we are increasing the number, and that will hopefully increase over the coming few months. But we do run them in all different places throughout the Americas, Canada and the USA in particular, a variety of different cities, London, Hong Kong, we are now doing it, it's Melbourne, Sydney, eventually, hopefully in Shanghai and in Tokyo. So we are running a number of those in person, but we also run them virtually. We have probably about maybe 50, probably about 60 to 70 courses running throughout. There have been a few questions about costs. Cost does depend on a number of different factors. The full course is about sort of £1,200 to £1,500. The half courses are about half that, but there are a number of different factors that are involved. So for full price information, best contact, as always, is those 3 addresses that are on the screen, which we're leaving on there. So I think those were the majority of questions. There are a few people who have asked similar questions to the ones that have already been answered. So I would encourage you just to look back at the answered questions. Let me just, there is a question about the WSET London School, which is located here in London. On Bermondsey Street, which many of you may have studied at. That is one of our approved program providers. It is part of WSET family. It's a slightly different format of an APP, but they are an independent APP from WSET Global, for whom Joseph and I are work for. So for jobs about them, you may approach them individually. They do post on the jobs board. So jobs, if you go to the WSET Global website, are often posted there for educators that may come up. There is also the, I think it's the Association of Wine Educators, which is a London-based or UK-based organization, and they often will take people in, and that's an opportunity for those of you who are not yet sponsored by an APP, but are looking to be sponsored by an APP, where you can build up a network to start connecting people like that. We are a little bit approaching the end of the time. I think, Joseph, was there any other questions here?
No, I don't see other ones standing out. If we can, we'll give a few more typed answers, and I've been doing that a little bit in the background as well. If you've got any remaining questions, please do reach out to those business development teams and those contacts that are on the screen at the end of today's session. I would invite you, you will have just seen a quick feedback poll. We'd love to get your view on how this webinar was. It helps us develop better webinars and better content for everyone. So please do give us your opinion there. This session's been recorded. It will go up onto our YouTube channel in the next few days. So look out for that. If you've got colleagues, friends who you know will want to watch this, or you want to just go back and double check something, please do so. We'll share that recording with you in an email later on in this week as well. Please do check out upcoming WSET Events Hub webinars. We've got loads of activity, loads of content coming up, some which is really interesting, subject specific, going into loads of detail, some brilliant experts. You'll see a load of our really good educators on there. So if you're getting an idea of, oh, what does a WSET WSET Educator look like, that is a great place to go to get exposed to them. And for any questions about continuing your studies or contacting those APPs, please go to our Where to Study page on wsetglobal.com.
And yes,
sorry, Chris,
yeah, if you're looking, that I answered a few questions about where can I find my local APPs. If you're looking for your local APPs, the Where to Study page. So if you go to WSET Global, Where to Study page, that is also a great resource as well. As our lovely events team have said, all the questions will be downloaded, so Joseph and I will have those. But if we didn't answer your question tonight, we just didn't see it. We apologize. There were quite a number of them we were trying to go through. Please contact those emails at the end of the slideshow, and one of the team will get back to you. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening. And we hope to see you sometime somewhere with a glass of wine, spirits, or sake in hand. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.